Every crisis comes with the same speech. We're all in this together. Spoiler alert, the data says otherwise. The richest 1% now own 45% of all global wealth. And that number went up during the last 3 crises. Today, we're breaking down exactly why that keeps happening. Picture 2020 markets crash. 36 million Americans file for unemployment in 8 weeks. Jeff Bezos makes $90 billion that same year. Not over the year, during the year people were losing their jobs. Same crisis, opposite outcomes. That's not a fluke. That's a pattern, and it goes back centuries. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what separates the people who lose position during a crisis from the people who just lose some paper value.
Okay, so wait, every time there's a crisis, rich people just win? That can't be right.
Not exactly. They don't always win, but they almost never lose their position. There's a difference.
What do you mean by position?
Think of wealth like altitude. When a crisis hits, everyone drops. But if you started at 10,000 feet, you drop to 8,000. If you started at ground level, you're underground.
That's actually a really messed up analogy. So the issue isn't that they dodged the crisis?
Exactly. The issue is that they absorb volatility. Their assets go down on paper, but they don't have to sell. They can wait.
And people without savings literally can't wait. They have to sell at the worst time.
Now you're getting it. A crash punishes the person forced to sell. Period. And who gets forced to sell? People without buffers.
So it's less about being smart and more about having room to breathe.
That's the whole game, Jason. Time and liquidity. Most people don't have either when a crisis hits. Here's the thing nobody tells you in school. A crisis doesn't hit the economy as one flat wave. It hits through completely different structures depending on what you own. If your life runs on a paycheck, a crisis is a threat to survival. If your life runs on assets, the same crisis is mostly a test of patience. Federal Reserve data from after 2008 showed something brutal. By 2016, the top 10% had fully recovered and actually moved above where they were in 2007. The bottom half of households was still below pre-crisis levels. 8 years, still behind. Meanwhile, the New York Fed just confirmed this K-shape is back in 2025. The S&P 500 keeps hitting record highs. Lower income wage growth, down to 1.5% annually, the weakest in years. Same economy, 2 completely different lived experiences. Ownership. Let's go back to the basics of why this split exists. The first reason is ownership. Rich people own assets. Everyone else depends primarily on income. Income is fragile. A paycheck can disappear in a week. Portfolio, a building, a block of stock that can survive volatility. During COVID, the top 10 richest men doubled their combined wealth. $700 billion became $1.5 trillion. That's $15,000 per second of growth while the economy was supposedly collapsing. Meanwhile, 165 million Americans at the bottom held less combined wealth than those same 10 men. The reason? Stocks and financial assets recovered before jobs did. People who owned markets recovered at market speed. People who only had jobs recovered at job market speed. Those are 2 very different clocks.
Alright, so now I get the individual level thing, but the policy stuff you were talking about, the Fed, the bailouts, that's where I get lost.
Think of it this way. When a building is on fire, firefighters go to where the damage can spread fastest. That's the financial system.
So they save the banks and the markets first.
Always. Because if credit markets freeze, the whole economy stops in days. It's not evil, it's triage. But here's the brutal side.
The people at the bottom wait for help that shows up later, or not at all.
And whoever owned the financial assets that just got stabilized, they recover immediately. The stimulus flows to assets first.
That's what happened in 2020, right? Fed pumped trillions in. Markets hit record highs during a pandemic. That felt insane.
Not insane. Structural. The system worked exactly as designed. The households closest to those financial assets captured the gains.
And the households farthest from financial assets felt nothing. Or worse, inflation.
Exactly. Low-income households faced above-average inflation from 2022 all the way through 2025. Higher-income households, below average. Same economy, different price tags.
So inflation is literally a wealth transfer in disguise.
You're starting to sound like a pro, Jason. Datey. The second reason is liquidity, and it might be the most brutal one. A crash punishes whoever is forced to sell, and it rewards whoever can wait. During a downturn, ordinary households are backed into a corner. They liquidate savings to cover rent. They sell investments after prices already fell. They borrow at terrible rates just to survive the month. Wealthy households do the exact opposite. They keep assets through the panic. They refinance at better terms. In some cases, they buy the assets that stressed households are being forced to dump. Not because they're smarter, because they have time. A billionaire can lose $1 billion on paper during a crash and still remain structurally untouchable. A middle-class family loses their job, their home equity, 2 years of purchasing power. That damage can echo for a decade. One loss is a markdown on abundance. The other is a destabilization of life, policy, and inflation. The third reason, policy responses almost always save the machinery of wealth first. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's just the order of operations. When a crisis hits, central banks move fast to restore bank liquidity. They protect bond markets. They stop fire sales. They stabilize asset prices. Labor markets and household balance sheets get repaired later. And often, much more unevenly. World Inequality database research found wealth concentration hit its highest point since World War II by end of 2021, driven almost entirely by rising asset prices during the policy response. When the Fed pumped in liquidity to stabilize markets, who benefited most? The households that already owned the most financial assets. Everyone else felt the crisis through job losses, rising prices, tighter credit. And here's the fourth layer no one talks about. Inflation is class-biased. Low-income households spend more of their budget on necessities. Rent, groceries, transport, energy. Those are exactly the categories that spike hardest during crises. Federal Reserve research confirmed low-income households consistently faced above-average inflation since late 2022. Higher-income households? Below average or right at the national level. For the wealthy, inflation is annoying. For the working poor, inflation is a stealth pay cut, the recovery trap. And here, it's where it gets really uncomfortable. Even the recovery deepens the gap. OECD analysis found wealth inequality rose in the US and UK after 2008. Not because the rich avoided pain, because financial assets recovered faster than housing. The middle class is much more dependent on home equity as wealth. The rich hold far more financial assets. With stock markets bounce back at warp speed and housing lags, the gap widens. And today, in 2025, the numbers are more extreme than ever. The top 1% now holds 31.7% of all U.S. wealth, the highest share since records began in 1989. Collectively, the wealthiest 1% hold about $55 trillion. That's roughly equal to what the entire bottom 90% of Americans own combined. And in 2024 alone, global billionaire wealth grew by $2 trillion. That's $5.7 billion per day. 204 new billionaires created in a single year. These numbers are not accidents. They are the output of a system. A system where crises are not storms that flatten everything equally. They are sorting mechanisms, and they keep sorting in the same direction.
Okay, I want to make sure I fully understand this. So crises don't just hurt poor people more. The recovery also helps rich people more.
Correct. The crash is broad, the recovery is selective, and that's the part nobody puts in the headline.
Because the headline is, markets recover, and people think that means everyone recovers.
But if you don't own markets, the market recovery means nothing to you.
And right now in 2025, the top 1% owns like a third of everything in America.
31.7%, highest on record. The top 1% holds $55 trillion. That's equal to everything owned by the bottom 90% combined.
Bro, that is a genuinely insane number.
And in 2024 alone, global billionaire wealth grew by $2 trillion, $5.7 billion per day. This didn't slow down after the crisis, it accelerated.
So the system isn't broken, it's just working against most people.
That's a very precise way to put it. Property rights, credit channels, market backstops, they all preserve the balance sheets closest to systemic importance.
Okay, so what do normal people actually do with this information?
First, you understand the game. You can't play a game you don't know exists. Second, you position yourself closer to assets than to pure income. Even small steps matter. Third, and this is the one that'll blow your mind,
Wait, don't leave me hanging like that.
there's a specific mechanism inside the banking system that guarantees this cycle repeats every single time, and most people have no idea it exists.
Okay, that has to be the next episode.
That is absolutely the next episode. So what's the takeaway? The rich rarely lose during crises, not because crises spare them, but because they're closest to the assets, institutions, and policy responses that get rescued first. Everyone else survives the gap between the crash and the recovery. And that gap is getting wider, not narrower. Now here's something most financial channels won't tell you. There's a specific mechanism hiding inside the modern banking system that quietly guarantees the cycle repeats every single time. It doesn't matter which party's in power. It doesn't matter which country you're in. The mechanism resets. The gap grows. The story repeats. And trust me, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Thanks for watching us, and if you like it, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel, waiting for your kind supports. Stay tuned with us. See you on next episodes.